Welcome back to Cayenne Pepper Commentary. This week was another absurd week in the NFL with a wide range of upsets and blowouts that I didn't think would be blowouts. So let's just jump into our game recaps. In the kickoff of Nike's rivalry uniforms, we got ourselves a show. For one quarter at least. This game was dominated by Seattle for the first 3 quarters, the defense forcing 2 interceptions and the offense putting them up 20-6 with less than 10 minutes left in the game. Then, randomly, Marvin Harrison Jr. remembered that as a receiver he's supposed to catch the football, not make sure it hits the ground. The Redbirds managed to tie the game with less than 30 seconds remaining, but due to the NFL's new kickoff rules, Seattle got to start their game-winning drive from the 40-yard line. Darnold does what's necessary, and the Seahawks get the win with a game-winning field goal. Do I like the manner in which Seattle won this? No. I think the rule is bad, but it is the rule, so your kicker has got to get in the landing zone. If the Cardinals play like they did in the fourth all game, they easily take this one, but that will have to depend on the play calling of Drew Petzing. Similarly to Thursday Night Football, our international Dublin game this week was a nothing burger until the fourth quarter. For the first 3 quarters, Aaron Rodgers absolutely demolished this Minnesota defense, only getting help from their own defensive front, forcing 2 turnovers and only allowing a field goal. In the third, Kenneth Gainwell also stepped up for Pittsburgh, giving them a 3-possession lead. Then, like Thursday night with just over 10 minutes to go, the Vikings offense came alive. Carson Wentz torched the Steelers defense for 2 straight drives while the Steelers could not move the ball. But, like Thursday, the Vikings stumble and Pittsburgh comes out with the win. Steelers improved to 3-1 and face an easy Browns team next week, but I suppose you never know with division rivals, especially in the AFC North. The more I think about this game, the more I stare at this box score, and the more highlights I watch, I start to just realize that Justin Herbert really lost the Chargers this game. Do I want to believe in a feel-good story for the Giants, that the rookie backup came in and beat the undefeated team with sheer willpower? Of course. Is that what happened? No, not really. Dart had a decent enough game through the air with 111 yards and a touchdown, but also came in to help Scadaboo on the ground with 54 yards and another touchdown. This game, though, was absolutely won by the Giants' defense. Marion Hampton was running all over them, but for some reason Harbaugh wanted to keep slinging the rock. Herbert had 41 pass attempts and only completed on 23 for a total of 203 yards and a touchdown. Herbert also threw 2 interceptions that both set the Giants' offense up with the field position they needed for easy touchdowns. The big downside for New York, though, is Malik Neighbors tearing his ACL. They already didn't have the brightest of hopes, but they could have maybe contended for a wild card spot with this team. But at this point, I think it's just time to start looking to next season. In the words of Cam Ward,
if we keeping a buck right now, we ass. So
the Titans dropped to 0-4 after going scoreless against a high-powered Houston defense. The number 1 overall pick only connects on 10 of his passes, as well as adding on an interception. Did I think the Titans were going to be good this year? No, not really. But it may be time to start ringing some alarm bells. This team needs some life, and I'm afraid to say it may be time to start looking at next year's draft. For Houston, this is a much-needed turnaround win. No team has ever won the Super Bowl after starting 0-3, but if they're the ones to do it, shutting out a division rival is a great way to get started on that path. It did take their offense the whole game to get going, with the score going to the fourth being just 6-0. But when it really started, it really started. 3 touchdowns in the fourth are enough to propel the Texans to their first win of the season. This game went not at all how I was expecting. Michael Penix turned it around after a god-awful performance last week and went 20 for 26, although one of those completions was an interception. The double-headed monster that is Atlanta's run game also decided to step up this week, putting up a collective 126 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. I don't necessarily think either team had a bad game. The Falcons just had drastically better quarterback play, which is to be expected with Jaden Daniels missing another week with knee issues. The young QB is expected to be back next week, though, when Washington will take on the Chargers. For the second week in a row, Buffalo has kept it close with a team they probably should have blown out of the water. I don't think anyone was worried that the Bills would lose this game, but definitely still a frustrating watch. Josh Allen, despite the interception early in the second quarter, had a fantastic game with 2 touchdowns through the air and another one tallied on the ground. Bills workhorse James Cook also had a solid game with 117 yards on the ground and a touchdown of his own. I think this game is really just standard for Saints fans. They'll be able to keep it competitive, but really just lose when it matters most. They're the one team I was saying before the season could realistically go 0-17, and they still haven't done anything to make me think that won't happen. The reigning champions are now one of only 2 teams, with the Bills, to keep a 0 in the loss column. In a reverse of their win last week, the Eagles dominated the first half, with Jalen Hurts seeming almost unstoppable, and another special teams touchdown this week with a blocked punt to start the game. Tampa finally started to really turn it on in the third quarter, but some crucial mistakes and turnovers ultimately spell their demise. I think the final score of this game makes it look closer than it actually was. There was never a moment during this game where I personally thought Philadelphia would lose. Sirianni finally overcomes his Buccaneers allergy on the Eagles' road to a perfect season. And the universe course corrects this week, with the Browns remembering they aren't allowed to be happy. This game wasn't even that dominant of an offensive performance by Detroit. I really just think the Browns are that bad. Amon-Ra did have the 2 touchdowns for the Lions offense, but he also accounted for almost half of Jared Goff's mere 168 passing yards. Jahmyr Gibbs also had a solid day on the ground with a touchdown of his own as he attempted to pick up the slack of David Montgomery's 12-yard performance. I think the Lions' score definitely looks better due to the fantastic field position gifted to them by their defense with 2 interceptions and a fumble recovery, but it is good to see that the Lions are back. The NFL has definitely felt a lot more fun when this team is good and competitive. Well, early season Bryce Young is back. Not that I even think this game was his fault, but he does get benched with around 8 minutes left for Andy Dalton, who, surprise, surprise, also does nothing. The Patriots genuinely just dominated this game. The first quarter punt return lit a fire in the 1-2 Patriots, and they proceeded to just whip Carolina's defense for the next 3 quarters. Drake May threw for 2 touchdowns and ran in a third, and Travion Henderson with Antonio Gibson both got a touchdown on the ground. The worst part about this for Carolina is they were turnover-free except a couple turnovers on downs when it was late in the game and they needed to go for it. They just genuinely could not move the ball. Absolutely huge bounce-back win for New England, though, especially after the 5-turnover game last week. The Jaguars might be more back than I thought. With an insane 4-turnover game this week, they now have 13 turnovers on the season and over 3 per game. The offense looks mediocre, but who needs offense when you're 4th in points allowed per game and 1st in turnovers forced? This isn't the same kind of defense we saw from their Saxonville days, though, with the defense only getting to the quarterback 1 time, but still. Tack on a special teams touchdown with the punt return, helping them edge out a victory in San Fran, and there's something special brewing in Jacksonville. Maybe the top spot in the AFC South is going to be more competitive than I thought. For the 49ers, this loss sucks, but playing a defense like that and missing half your offensive weapons and your defensive weapons, these things will just happen. Purdy throws 2 picks in his first week back, which he'll definitely have to work on, but hopefully as pieces return from injury, this team can get back to its former glory. I am not surprised at the amount of terrorist edits I've seen of Adonai Mitchell since this game ended. The second-year receiver single-handedly took 14 points off the board from Indianapolis in their 7-point loss. Granted, there were a lot of mistakes in this game, not just from him, but you cannot fumble the ball celebrating like that. Daniel Jones has his worst game of the year, throwing for 2 interceptions as the Colts finally fall. On the reverse end, Matthew Stafford had a fantastic game, throwing for 3 touchdowns and 375 yards through the air. He also remembered how much they paid Tutu Atwell this offseason and decided to give him an 88-yard go-ahead bomb that sealed the game in the Rams' favor. Much-needed bounce-back win this week after the embarrassing fashion they lost last week, but they have to play their kryptonite, the 49ers, on Thursday night next week. Well, I did say to never count this team out as long as Mahomes and Andy Reid were still in business. This game was looking to be a competitive one through 2 quarters, but come the third, the Baltimore defense just fell apart. Couple this with Lamar Jackson leaving midway through the third with a hamstring injury, and it was just all over for the Ravens. Mahomes threw for 4 touchdowns on the day, the only touchdown scored by the Chiefs in their rout of the Ravens. He looked near unstoppable in this return-to-form game for him. All 4 of the touchdowns were also to different receivers, truly showing off the versatility of this Kansas City offense. My only hope for this game is that Lamar bounces back quickly from that hamstring injury. The sport is always better when everyone is playing at their peak performance, especially those elite quarterbacks. But it was interesting getting to see Cooper Rush playing again. Solid win for Kansas City as they try to fight to reclaim the AFC West. How did the Raiders almost win this game? The Chicago defense forced 4 turnovers as Geno Smith reverted to Jets form, throwing 3 picks, and yet still took a blocked field goal to win this game for Chicago. I'm genuinely in awe looking at the highlights of this game and reading the play-by-play because the Raiders just should not have been in this whatsoever. It's not even that the Vegas defense was doing that good. They only held Chicago to 3 points and forced an interception. The Bears would just get the ball in field goal range every drive because of the turnovers, do nothing with it, and kick a field goal. So the Raiders were doing just enough to beat out the Cairo Santos Bears all game until they eventually allowed a pair of touchdowns in the second half. I don't think I want to talk about this game anymore. I'm shocked that it was this close. This team blew out the Cowboys? And what is the worst thing about professional football that I really think they should adopt from college? This game ends in a tie. The Cowboys continue to prove that they have absolutely zero defense, allowing 31 points per game, which ironically makes them 31st, just ahead of the Ravens. Not to discredit the rushing performance from Javonte Williams and Josh Jacobs, but this game was a good old-fashioned quarterback duel. Both QBs had over 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns, as well as both completing exactly 31 passes. This game was competitive all throughout, with the Cowboys taking a 3-point lead with only 43 seconds remaining, followed by the Packers hitting a game-tying field goal to send it to overtime. The Cowboys drive downfield on their singular overtime drive, just for the Green Bay defense to make a goal line stand and force a field goal. The Packers then use the remaining 4.5 minutes to drive to the Dallas 16, where they're also forced to kick as time expires. This game remains game of the week, but still a mildly disappointing finish. One of these teams had to enter the win column this week, and unfortunately for the New York Fumbles, Miami manages to sneak out a win. The Jets probably could have won this game if just one of those turnovers didn't go the other way, especially when you realize 2 of Miami's drives post-fumble ended in 6 for the Dolphins. This was honestly a really good average NFL game despite those turnovers. Both quarterbacks completed over 65% of their passes, with Justin Fields completing over 74%, and both teams had upwards of 120 rushing yards. New York just has to buy some stickum for those gloves, and this is a shootout that could go either way. Dolphins star receiver Tyreek Hill, though, does sadly leave the game early with a leg in a cast, and currently, as of writing this, there's no news about his injury. Little side note, they released the injury while I was editing. He may never play football again. I mean, he tore everything in his knee. Obviously praying for him, but that's a rough injury to have, especially when your whole kit is your speed. What a dominant performance defensively for the Broncos. The Bengals scored once with a field goal on their opening drive, and after that, it was just punts. No turnovers, not even on downs, just 8 straight punts for Cincinnati. Obviously, a showing like that helped them out offensively, with Denver racking up 512 yards of offense, with 326 of those coming from Bo Nix's 42 passing attempts. The young quarterback also had 2 touchdowns through the air and a third on the ground, with a Marvin Mims rushing touchdown being the 4th score for the Broncos. Not much else really to say about this game, just what a dominant showing from the home team. Well, this was a historically bad week for my predictions, with my preseason predictions going 6-9-1 on the week. This might be my wake-up call to do new predictions every week. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please like and subscribe. My analytics say over 80% of my viewers aren't subscribed currently. Hopefully next week is as exciting as this one, and I'll see you guys then.